I lay stretched out on the narrow sofa in my apartment on the east side of Charlotte, one hand cradling a mug of lukewarm tea, the other pressed against my forehead, as if that would somehow ease the pounding behind my eyes. My phone pulsed on the coffee table again. Another call. I didn't need to look. I already knew who it was. Mom. Dad. Kyle. The same 3 names, blinking over and over like some kind of emergency alarm only meant for me, as if one more unanswered call would make the device burst into flames. 6 months. It had been exactly 6 months since I walked out of my childhood home. Not in rage, not in tears. Just silence. A quiet kind of ending that didn't need a slammed door or screaming matches. I packed a few clothes, my aging laptop, and a worn leather notebook filled with numbers I once used to help keep everyone else's lives afloat. Then I stepped out into the fading light of a Charlotte evening and didn't look back. No one stopped me. No one asked where I was going. And not a single person imagined I wouldn't come back. They were used to me, Camille, the responsible one, the dependable one. I was the fixer, the walking band-aid for every overdue bill, every forgotten payment, every impulsive mistake my brother Kyle made. When the electricity got cut off, I paid it. When the fridge broke, I fixed it. When Dad missed his car insurance renewal, guess who made the call? It was always me, never them. And back then, I thought that meant I was strong. I thought I was being a good daughter, that carrying the family's burdens was noble, that holding my breath while they drained me little by little somehow made me virtuous. But now, sitting in a 400-square-foot apartment that smells faintly of fresh paint and instant noodles, I understood something different. For nearly a decade, I wasn't saving a family. I was fueling a machine built on my silence. I was the engine running while everyone else just sat back and coasted. The phone vibrated again. It buzzed so aggressively it nearly slid off the table. I didn't flinch. I didn't reach for it, because I already knew the message waiting for me. Camille, how could you do this to your family? If you still care about us, call back. Right now. I leaned my head back and stared at the ceiling. It was quiet here. Blessedly quiet. No one knocking on my bedroom door to ask for a ride. No one sliding utility bills under my plate at dinner. No one whispering to me that Kyle needed just a little more help to get back on his feet. My name is Camille Foster. I'm 28 years old, and I work as a financial analyst in uptown Charlotte. I paid for college with a full scholarship. I built my credit score from scratch. I spent my 20s grinding through hours of spreadsheets and client calls so my family could keep living in a house I no longer felt welcome in. And the one time I paused, the one time I let myself breathe, the calls came flooding in like I'd set the world on fire. They always said Kyle was the dreamer, the one with potential, the one who just needed more time, more chances. When he dropped out of school, Mom hugged him. When he quit his job at the coffee shop, Dad defended him. When he crashed the family car into a pole, accidents happen, they said. And me? I never broke a rule, never asked for help, never missed a payment. And somehow, I ended up being the villain in a story I had been financing all along. The apartment around me was still. Outside, the wind rattled the window just enough to remind me it was real. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel like the broken one. I felt free. I got my first job at 16, not because I wanted to buy clothes or go to the movies with my friends, but because I knew deep down that if I didn't start taking care of myself, no one else would. Every afternoon after school, while my classmates were being picked up in air-conditioned SUVs, I rode my bike 4 blocks to a little bakery on the corner of Selwyn and Hillcrest. I wiped tables, washed dishes, took out the trash, and biked home after dark with my pants still smelling like cinnamon rolls and bleach. I used my first paycheck to buy a used laptop, thick as a dictionary, slower than molasses, but it worked. It got me through high school. I never asked Mom or Dad to help. I didn't even tell them I had a job until 6 months in. And when I did, Mom looked up from her soap opera and said, "Well, I hope your grades don't suffer. That's all we need right now." When Kyle dropped out of his art school after 2 years, Mom didn't blink. She opened a new credit card and bought him a brand new MacBook so he could get back on his feet. He needed it, she said. He was figuring out his next step. But when I got into Georgia State on a full scholarship, Dad said, "Couldn't you have picked a school closer to home? What if Kyle needs the car?" And when I landed a job at the largest investment consulting firm in Charlotte, Mom barely looked up from her newspaper. "That's far," she muttered. "How are you going to drive us to our appointments?" It became clear then. My success wasn't a celebration. It was a threat to the little world they had built around Kyle. Still, I tried. I told myself it was just temporary, that once Kyle got on his feet, once Mom and Dad paid off the sofa or the new fridge or whatever they were financing that year, it would all balance out. So I paid a bill here, a repair there, then another bill, then a full month's utilities, then car insurance, then groceries, then Kyle's digital art class, then the medication for Dad's back, then a leak in the roof. It wasn't one big ask. It was 1,000 little ones, each one tiny enough to justify. "This month's just a little tight," Mom would say. "Can you pitch in a bit more?" And I would. Every time. I stopped going out to lunch at work. I canceled a weekend trip with friends. I cut back on therapy. I even paused my student loan payments. Not because I couldn't afford them, but because I was trying to keep the lights on in a house I didn't even live in anymore. The thing that hurt most wasn't the money. It was how normal they acted about it. There were no thank yous. No, "Are you sure you can manage?" No, "We appreciate you." Just expectation. As if my paycheck was their safety net. As if my adult life didn't matter as long as theirs stayed intact. And every time I came home, after 50-hour work weeks, after long commutes, after skipping meals, I'd find Kyle in the same spot. On the couch, barefoot, playing video games, a soda can at his feet, and Mom in the kitchen, making his favorite stew, and Dad in his chair, bragging to some neighbor on speakerphone about my son, the artist who won an award once, in 5th grade. I wanted to scream. I wanted to ask, when do I get to be the child? When do I get to fail? When do I get to be held instead of doing all the holding? But I didn't scream. I smiled. I unpacked my work bag. I paid the water bill. And I sat at a table that never had a seat really meant for me, until the day I decided I couldn't keep doing it anymore. It started with a single phone call. I was wrapping up a presentation at the office when my cell lit up with Dad's name. I almost ignored it. He never called during work hours. But something about the timing made my stomach turn. I stepped out into the hallway, took a breath, and answered. His voice was calm, too calm. "Camille, we're in a bit of a bind with the bank. Just a temporary thing. The mortgage is late and, well, we might be looking at foreclosure if we don't come up with something soon." My breath caught in my throat. The house, that old brick house on Maple Street. It wasn't a mansion, it wasn't even modern, but it was where I learned to ride a bike, where I taped up my first A+ spelling test, where I used to imagine I'd have my own home office one day, before that dream was replaced by Kyle's gaming setup in my old bedroom. How much? I asked, even though I already knew I would say yes. Just $980 a month, maybe for a few months, just until your mom and I get back on our feet. That night, I canceled the deposit I had placed on an apartment I had been eyeing for months, my first real place, with wood floors, a balcony, and a view of the city. I sent the first transfer from my savings, and I kept sending, month after month, without fail, rain or shine, holiday or not for a few months, but for nearly 2 years. In that time, I paid off their late bills, covered for roof leaks, paid Kyle's phone plan, bought Dad's new tires, ordered groceries online when Mom just couldn't make it to the store. I even Venmo'd Kyle for his birthday, $200, for a man who hadn't worked a full-time job in 3 years. All in, the total was just under $30,000. And that's not counting what I gave before, the laptop, the emergency dental. the electric bill that time the fridge shorted out. But the money wasn't what broke me. It was how easily they asked, how quickly they forgot. I was no longer a person to them. I was a lifeline, a quiet, dependable, faceless lifeline. And lifelines don't get tired. Lifelines don't ask questions. Lifelines don't say no. One day, I was standing in a corner store after work, half starved, half awake, and reached for a gallon of milk. I opened my wallet and froze. I didn't have enough. Not for milk. I had drained myself so thin I couldn't afford to eat. And yet somewhere across town, I was lounging in my old room, in the house I was saving, using the Wi-Fi I paid for, playing video games on a flat screen Mom had justified as mental health support. That moment, staring at a carton of milk like it was luxury, was when something shifted inside me. I realized I wasn't being strong. I was being swallowed. Slowly, completely. Quietly, by people who didn't even notice. I went home that night and opened my banking app, which I'd been avoiding for weeks. The red numbers didn't surprise me anymore. I just stared at them, numb. Then I did something I hadn't done in years. I opened a blank document. At the top, I wrote Foster Family Ledger. And I started tracking. Every cent, every date, every lie disguised as a favor. I didn't know what I would do with it. I just knew. I couldn't keep pretending this was love. It was a Sunday afternoon, drizzling just enough to blur the windshield as I drove. I had just finished a weekend shift, overtime again, my body sore, my head heavy, but I still stopped at the grocery store. I picked out salmon, fresh vegetables, frozen meals, the good kind Mom liked. I even grabbed a bouquet of yellow tulips from the clearance rack, the kind she used to say reminded her of spring in Nashville. I drove 42 minutes across town with those bags in the back seat, heart aching and hopeful, like maybe, just maybe, this time they'd notice how hard I was trying. When I walked in, I didn't expect balloons. But I also didn't expect Mom standing in the middle of the kitchen, arms crossed like she'd been rehearsing this moment all morning. "Camille," she said flatly, "we need to talk." I hadn't even put the bags down. Before I could answer, she continued, "We already discussed this. What you're sending every month, it's not enough anymore." The words hit like a slap. I blinked. Not enough. Dad stepped into the room, arms folded. His voice was steady, but there was a bitterness in it that hadn't been there before. "You make good money. You live alone. Meanwhile, we're struggling every single day. Doesn't that seem unfair to you?" I stared at them, the people who raised me, the people I had carried financially, emotionally, spiritually, the people who hadn't noticed when I stopped sleeping, who never asked if I was okay, who never said thank you. And now, standing there with raw salmon dripping condensation onto the tile, they were telling me I owed them more. Mom stepped closer, her tone sharp and theatrical. "All you ever do is take," she snapped. I nearly laughed. I wanted to, but my chest was too tight to let the sound out. "I'm the one taking," I whispered. Dad's face hardened. "That's enough. You're being disrespectful." I looked down, slowly placed the grocery bags on the counter, and let my hands fall to my sides. My voice was shaking, but I forced the words out. "I've paid this mortgage for nearly 2 years. I paid the water, the gas, the roof repair, the phone bills, Kyle's birthday, your prescriptions, your groceries, even your freaking Netflix. And now you're saying it's not enough." Mom's lips tightened into that familiar line, the same one she always wore when she was trying to win an argument by sheer willpower. "If it's that much of a burden," she said coldly, "then leave. Walk out that door and don't come back." She meant it. I could see it in her eyes. She didn't say it to test me. She said it because she believed I'd never have the spine to do it. I stood there for a moment, soaking in the silence that followed. Even Kyle didn't look up from the couch. He just muttered something under his breath, maybe so dramatic, or "Here we go again." I didn't answer. I didn't shout. I didn't cry. I turned around, walked to the front door, and stepped out into the rain. It soaked through my shirt instantly. My shoes slipped slightly on the steps. My car's windshield fogged over before I could even start the engine. But my hands didn't shake. My vision didn't blur. Because for the first time in my life, I felt light. Not because I was leaving them behind, but because I was finally leaving the version of me who thought she had to earn love by emptying her bank account. That day, I didn't drive straight home. I pulled into a gas station on the edge of town, sat in the parking lot, and cried, not because I was sad, but because I knew the weight I'd carried for years wasn't duty. It was chains, and they had finally fallen off. The new apartment was small, just one bedroom, one bathroom, and floors that creaked no matter how carefully I stepped. The walls were painted a soft ivory, and the windows didn't quite close all the way, so the wind whistled at night, but it was mine. No one knocked on the door to ask for money. No one left sticky notes on the fridge with lists of errands. No one texted me at 11 p.m. to front a gas bill or to send Kyle another $100 because he's going through a tough time. For the first time in years, I woke up when my alarm rang, not from someone shouting down the hallway. I made my own coffee, opened the window, let the sunlight in. I folded my laundry without being asked to iron someone else's shirt. I made eggs without worrying if Mom had something healthier for Dad. I sat down with a book, not bills. It was quiet. God, it was so quiet. And at first, that quiet felt unfamiliar, almost guilty, like I'd stolen it from someone else. But as the days passed, the guilt softened into something gentler. I started to breathe easier. I started to laugh again, softly at old YouTube videos, or at the sound my upstairs neighbor made when he danced in his kitchen every Sunday. I even started planning again, something I hadn't done in years. Maybe a weekend trip to Asheville. Maybe finally applying for that senior role at work. Maybe, just maybe, starting a savings account that didn't belong to anyone but me. For 3 months, I lived like that. Quietly, carefully, gratefully, until the messages started again. It began with a text from Mom. Your dad got a warning letter from the bank. Something's going on. Call me. I read it, put the phone down, didn't reply, not because I didn't care, but because I already knew what something meant. It was never about health, never about safety. It was always about money. 2 days later, my phone lit up with a missed call from Dad, then a voicemail. His voice wasn't panicked. It was cold, measured. We need to talk. The house situation can't be ignored anymore. I didn't listen to the rest. I knew exactly where this was going. Same story, different day. Then Kyle called. His voicemail, unlike the others, was sharp, coated with bitterness instead of desperation. You think you're better than us now? Just because you get to sit in some fancy office? You don't get to walk away from your family, Camille. You don't get to act like you're some hero just because life feels easier without us. If we lose the house, that's on you. I froze in the lobby of my building, still holding my lunch, my badge, my sense of peace. And just like that, it cracked. That voice, that entitlement, like I was the villain because I stopped being the solution. Like I was cruel for choosing silence over sacrifice. I slipped the phone into my coat pocket and walked outside, down the sidewalk flooded with late afternoon sun. People laughed around me. Traffic hummed. Birds chirped. It all felt distant, like I was watching it from behind glass. Because I had spent years being Camille the lifeline, Camille the fixer, Camille the good daughter who never said no. And now I was Camille, the one who stopped answering the phone. And for once, I wasn't sorry. The next morning, something gnawed at me. It wasn't just the guilt or Kyle's voicemail echoing in my mind. It was the quiet, calculated tone of Dad's voice. The way he'd said, the house situation can't be ignored. No panic, no apology, just a statement, cold as an overdue notice. I sat at my kitchen table with my laptop open, staring at my coffee like it could answer the question twisting in my gut. Then I logged in. It was the account, the one I used to send the mortgage payments. I hadn't looked at it in months. For years, I had trusted that when I transferred money to that account, it went to where it was supposed to go, the house. I scrolled through the history. My name, my deposits, every month like clockwork. $980 here, $980 there, sometimes more if there was a surprise repair. And then the final transaction, 8 months ago, just before I stopped helping. No payments made to the mortgage company after that. I blinked, scrolled again. Nothing. The money had gone somewhere else. My chest tightened, my fingers numb. This wasn't just a misunderstanding. This wasn't them falling behind. This was betrayal. They had received my money, kept it, and never said a word. I didn't call them right away. I needed facts. So I did something I hadn't done since this all began. I called the bank. I introduced myself politely, said I used to assist with my family's mortgage payments, and asked to confirm the status, just in case things had fallen through the cracks. The woman on the other end was helpful, apologetic. Unfortunately, Miss Foster, the mortgage has been delinquent for 8 months now. We've sent several warnings. 8 months. I hung up and sat perfectly still. The room was quiet, except for the soft hum of my fridge. Outside, someone was mowing the lawn. It all sounded distant, hollow, like it was happening in another life. I had been eating instant noodles for dinner, delaying my own dreams, canceling plans, cutting corners at every turn. And they hadn't just let me. They had lied to me. I picked up my phone and texted Dad. I just spoke with the bank. They said the mortgage is 8 months overdue. I kept sending money. So what happened? No answer. I waited 5 minutes, then 10. Finally, the phone rang. Dad's voice was tired, like he'd already decided how this conversation would go. I know you're upset, but it's not what you think. I laughed, not out of humor, but disbelief. Oh, because what I think is that I sent you thousands of dollars to save that house. And not only did you not use it, you didn't tell me. Not once. There was silence. Then, Mom's voice cut in. She must have taken the phone. Don't you dare speak to your father like that, she snapped. Her voice was shrill, part fury, part desperation. You think we did this on purpose? You think we don't feel terrible? We tried our best, Camille. It's not our fault the money wasn't enough. I stayed quiet, so she kept going. We're family. Families help each other. That's what you do. I took a deep breath, closed my eyes. Help has a limit, Mom. And I've been treated like a free ATM for years. She started to cry, loud, performative sobs I'd heard 100 times. We'll pay you back, I promise, I cut her off. You've said that before. Every time. And every time I believed you. Silence again. Then Dad's voice, low and steady. If you don't help, we could lose the house. We're about to lose everything. And my response came from somewhere deeper than anger. It came from clarity. Then lose it. That's not my responsibility anymore. I ended the call, and then I powered off my phone. Just like that. No dramatic exit. No final word. No need to scream or cry. I placed the phone face down on the kitchen table and walked away. For the next 3 days, I didn't check messages. I didn't scroll. I didn't flinch at phantom vibrations. There were none. Just silence. And for the first time in my adult life, that silence didn't feel lonely. It felt sacred. I woke up early the next morning, made a fresh pot of coffee, and stood barefoot on my tiny balcony. The city was still stretching itself awake, sunlight hitting the tops of buildings like gold paint. I took a slow sip and let the air settle in my lungs. For the first time, I wasn't rushing to solve anything. No one needed me, and I didn't feel guilty for it. I cleaned my apartment, watered my plants, reorganized my closet, sat with a book I'd bought 6 months ago but never opened. I ate when I was hungry. I slept when I was tired. I breathed without bracing. It was nothing and everything. By the 3rd day, I felt it, that inner hum. The return of my own voice. My own rhythm. the quiet knowledge that I had finally stepped out of the storm. Then, I turned my phone back on. It lit up like fireworks. Missed calls, voicemails, messages. So many it took several seconds just to load them all. I didn't touch anything at first. I just stared. Then I pressed play. Mom, voicemail 1, Camille. You'll regret this. That house means everything to me. We built our lives in it. How can you be so cold? Dad, voicemail 2. We're out of options. If you don't help, we don't know what we'll do. Is that what you want? Kyle, voicemail 3. His voice was clipped, bitter. You're letting this family fall apart because of your pride. Just because you can afford to disappear doesn't mean you should. You think walking away makes you strong? It makes you selfish. I listened to every word, from beginning to end. No fast forward, no skipping. But I didn't cry. I didn't pace the room or second guess myself. I just sat down, tired. Not the kind of tired that sleep could fix. The kind that came from years of carrying people who never once reached back. The kind that came from being everyone else's solution. Until I became their enemy. They said I was cold. But the truth is I was healing. I wasn't the daughter who rushed home anymore. I wasn't the invisible fixer. I wasn't the guilt-ridden provider who lived paycheck to paycheck for a family that saw her as nothing but a wallet. I was just Camille, sitting in a quiet apartment, breathing, and for once, no one was reaching into my silence to take it away. That night, I lay in bed, tracing the edge of my old comforter, the same one I had taken from my parents' house when I left. It smelled like lavender detergent now, not like home. But somehow, it still held pieces of who I used to be. I kept hearing Mom's voice in my head. You'll regret this. Not, we're sorry. Not, thank you for everything. Just a warning, a threat wrapped in guilt. And maybe once it would have worked. Maybe even a year ago, those voicemails would have broken me. I would have apologized, sent another payment, shown up with another bag of groceries and a tired smile. But this time, all I felt was exhaustion, a different kind of tired, the kind that sinks into your bones when you realize you've spent years proving your worth to people who never looked up. I had been the one to say yes to everything, the one who canceled dates, skipped vacations, pulled double shifts, the one who smiled through it, who rationalized it, who told herself, this is just what love looks like. But love doesn't demand silence. Love doesn't lie about mortgages and expect more when you're already empty. Love doesn't call you selfish for setting boundaries. And yet, I still found myself wondering, what if they really do lose the house? What if one day the phone rings and it's not guilt on the other end, but reality? What if my parents have nowhere to go? What if Kyle ends up on the street? What if, despite everything, I still care? I sat there for a long time, staring into the dark, heart tugging in two directions, one tied to loyalty, the other to self-respect. And then I asked myself a question I had been afraid of for years. What would it take for them to truly see me? Not as a bank account, not as a fallback plan, not as the responsible one who just handles things, but as a daughter, a person, a woman who gave everything she had, and then some. I don't know the answer, and maybe I never will. But I do know this. That night I didn't cry. I didn't rehearse what I'd say if they called again. I didn't check my balance or look up foreclosure statistics or wonder if I should have sent one last payment just in case. I simply closed my eyes and went to sleep. And in that sleep there was no guilt, no fear, just peace. If you've made it this far, thank you. Truly. Because sometimes the hardest part isn't walking away. It's staying away. It's the quiet that comes after the chaos. The questions that follow your courage. The ache of not knowing whether you've done the right thing. Only that you couldn't survive the old way anymore. So if you've ever been in my shoes, if you've ever been called ungrateful for saying no, or cold for finally thinking of yourself, I want you to know you are not alone. And maybe neither am I.